Hey guys, what's up? Today I'm coming to you with another book review. Once again, my name is Nick Pell, and this is coming straight from my room. Now today's book is one of my favorites, I guess you could say. It's called The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. Many of you have probably heard of it. This is the companion library edition. It's a little old. My mom actually had this when she was a kid. This is the version I read. It has some illustrations in it, which are kind of cool. Yeah, the book is approximately 350 pages, a little less. And I think there's some that are a little bit longer, but it's the same text either way. First up is characters, as always. First character is its title character, Huck Finn. Huck is basically a kid who doesn't really fit in with the everyday society that he's been basically put into. After Samuel Clemens' first novel, The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, Huck basically adapted to everyday society so that he could get the money that they found at the end of that. He's living his life in the town with Tom, going to school and whatnot, being a kid. He also has an alcoholic father who comes into the story in about its first 30 pages, 50 pages or so. He basically tries to take Huck away from the town and try to get his money so that he can keep getting alcohol and whatnot. And then you have the book's other main character, whose name is Jim. Jim is basically a runaway slave. He found out that his owner was planning on selling him. In order to keep the little freedom that he has, he took off and ran, as any smart person would do. Huck and Jim are basically the two main characters of this whole novel. And then Huck ends up living with the widow. That's all she's really identified as. She basically takes in Huck and raises him and tries to civilize him. And then you also have Tom Sawyer. Tom is basically in the beginning and at the end of the novel. It's actually quite comical how he shows up at the end of the novel. Tom is basically Huck's best friend. You just see their relationship develop a little bit more in this novel. If you want to get Tom Sawyer's story, check out Clemens' The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. It's a little more kiddish than Huck Finn, but it's still a good read. And then you also have two of the funnier characters in the novel. They show up in about 3/4 of the way through the book, I think. They're called the Duke and the King. And these are basically two hustlers who scam people out of their money. They put on fake shows that are basically crap and take off with people's money. They overprice the shows and everything, and it's just really hilarious. And those are just two people that I wanted to mention because they're talked about a lot when this book is referenced. Onto the plot starts out with Huck adapting to everyday life with the help of Tom Sawyer. And eventually Huck's dad shows up and takes him away. He takes him away to live in a cabin in the woods, basically. And eventually Huck, fearing for his life, takes off and fakes his own death. It was in this fashion, him living in the woods, that he meets up with Jim, who runs away, as I said before, due to his possibility of being sold again. The two meet up, they decide to stick together, and they do throughout the whole novel. On to themes. First theme is racism. And this is a theme that many people bring up whenever they talk about The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. Basically because it has the N-word in it. Well, it's set in the 1840s or something, so right before the outbreak of the Civil War. So you kind of see that tension. You can kind of identify the society along with how history kind of depicts it. And this is through Samuel Clemens' writing, so you can kind of see that because he was an author back in the 1800s. Racism is a big part of it, and one thing I want to talk about with that, recently there have been people, I'm not sure exactly where, but they want to redo Clemens' original Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, taking out the N-word, which, in my opinion, makes it all the more racist because people read the story knowing that it's in there. They accept it, and I don't know. Racism is a tough issue, but you shouldn't change a text just because it fits with a certain society's point of view. And that's just my opinion, but leave a comment below if you have an opinion on that. It'd be kind of interesting to see. These last three themes, Huck deals with himself personally. He deals with truth, good and evil, and then freedom. There comes a time in the novel where Huck basically has to make the decision of whether to free Jim or turn him in. And this weighs heavily on his conscience because ever since he's grown up, he's been told that what you're supposed to do if you see a runaway slave is to report them, or else you'll go to hell, or whatever. At the time that he has to make this decision, Huck and Jim are basically best friends by now. The possibility of turning in Jim weighs heavily on Huck, and he struggles with the decision because A, he's a kid, and B, he's basically dealing with his own morals compared to what society has deemed appropriate. Yeah, you'll have to read the story to find out what he does, but it's interesting. So yeah, on to enjoyment. I read this book originally for my AP Lit class last year. I read it first the summer before, and then I read it during the actual class. So I've read it twice, and I have enjoyed it both times. It's a classic, and I love it. It's got a great story, it's got great themes, it's got great imagery. It's basically got all the things that a classic should have. Or if you decide to read Huckleberry Finn, read it unedited, because you'll get a much better experience out of it, because you're not reading today's culture, you're reading the 1800s culture, which gives the story a lot more meaning. If you've read Tom Sawyer and want to read this, I do not expect it to be the same. As you could probably tell from my review thus far, Huck Finn is basically a story that it has much more mature themes, and it's much more situated for an adult audience than Tom Sawyer was. Tom Sawyer is basically a kid's story, and Huck Finn is not. My one little gripe with it, it does get a little bit bland at points, but it quickly picks up after those points. Overall, I enjoyed it very, very much. Yeah, I recommend this book if you are into books from the 1800s, Samuel Clemens novels, or just books about basically self-discovery, which is basically what this book is ultimately about. Then I recommend picking it up because it's very good, and odds are you'll probably have to read it for either college or high school sometime. So yeah, that's my review. I hope that you enjoyed it. Like, favorite, comment, subscribe if you choose to. Once again, I'm Nick Pell, and keep on reading.